Hello there, I am Gifty Auntie and welcome to TSP with Gifty Auntie. Hello there and welcome to the beautiful month of May, the month that we celebrate motherhood on TSP with me, Gifty Auntie. It's going to be very exciting on the show, and I'm so much excited about the show we are going to air today. Because what? I know I'm going to learn a lot. I am going to learn a lot. Charlie, let me ask you, who is telling the stories of the women of Ghana? Or the women of Africa? No, I'm not talking about the Zs and the millennials and the whatever, but the women whose shoulders we have stood on, the women that we make reference of, or the reference to. We can talk about Yasantua, but there are so many women, our great-grandmothers, great-great-great-grandmothers from across the country who made way. They've raised amazing men and women who have stood the test of time. Are we losing it as mothers now? Because we don't know our history. We don't know the strength of our foremothers. Well, today I have a show for you. But before I introduce my guest, let me say thank you to Amazing Grace Enterprise, who gave me this beautiful fabric. And it was put together, styled, designed beautifully by one of my very own. I love wearing things by my daughters. This is Amatua. Formerly our Lori. Now she's come back home to her traditional name, Amatua. Thank you so much. My beads by Twinny Crafts, the beautiful twins. My accessories by The Boy Fashion. Makeup, Esiedwa. The Global, and makeup product by Sigma, by Mabel, or Sigma Health and Beauty. You can call them that. Who else do I have to thank? Let me thank myself for being beautiful and nice. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the one and only, the phenomenal and world-acclaimed playwright, poet, amazing proud son of Ghana, Chief Moomen. Woo!
Kuriye janjang kurina baba janjang kuriye janjang kuriye janjang kurina bihi janjang kuriye janjang se janjang
janjang
kuriye janjang kuriye janjang.
Thank
you very much.
Always a pleasure to see you. I'm so glad you agreed to come on the show today. Today we are in for a show.
It's an important topic, so wherever I was, I needed to make time for this.
Thank you so much. Kindly take your seat.
Thank you.
You see, I told you. Tell somebody to call somebody because it's going to be exciting. I'll be back. Kuriye. Welcome back to TSP with me, Gifty Auntie, our very first edition for the month of May. And I'm already excited because of my guest. And I've followed him for years. We are all proud of him. If you haven't watched any of his play yet, shame on you. The next time you hear, please go and watch. But before I get down to business, let me acknowledge all those who supported our Easter fete. During Easter, we actually were able to feed over 2,600 kids across the country. Very exciting. We couldn't have done it without your help. The individuals who contributed money, thank you and God bless you. But let me mention these few who also gave us product and some money. Ekunfi Pure Juice, Ruth Tiso Foundation, Best Deal Shipping, Mevac Travel and Tours, Sassy Ladies International, Bosheba Foundation International, Big Hearts Foundation International, God's Ultimate Woman, Lady Rosamond Prempe, thank you so much. Mama Lou, Perfumed Rice, that's authentic natural rice made in Ghana. AMG Farms, Gigi's Kitchen, been with us for many years. Everywhere we go, she goes with us and makes sure she cook hot meals and the children eat fresh, hot meals. I mean, jollof chicken, everything freshly prepared. La Bianca Company Limited. Thank you so much, La Bianca. We are always grateful to you. Dede's Classics, my own sister. Sometimes I don't take the letters to her, but she'll see it and said, hey, we haven't contributed. We are coming. And she always comes. Vena Mineral Water and Trillium Company. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're so grateful to all of you. Please get ready for us because September will be coming for the Pregnant Women's Program. And you know we do it together with you. We are grateful. Now, again, let me say thank you to Vena Mineral Water, which has a balanced pH level. Now it comes without the seal, the plastic seal. It's still firmly, secured, but the plastic seal is off because we want to make sure our planet is safe. Less plastic, better climate and environment for all of us. And the bottle is also very light now and easy to squeeze it. You just dump it in a bin near you. You don't have to keep the whole bottle. So you just, wherever it is, you just squeeze it, put it in your bag. When you get to where you need to dispose it of properly, you do that as well. Thank you to Bigo Drinks. We are grateful. Kidsville, where every child's dream comes true. That's on the Spinks Road, adjacent Noble House. Everything kids go under one roof. That's the Kidsville Mall. Make sure you go there every time to get your children happy. Everything educational, toys, what have you, they've got it there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I have a message from APSA. APSA says it understands the unique journey of women in business, from juggling multiple responsibilities to navigating financial complexities and societal expectations. Your resilience and vision inspire APSA. That's why APSA has created the She Business account, tailored to empower visionary women leaders like you and me with collateral-free loans up to 2 million Ghana cedis, insurance coverage, discounted loan interest rates, and capacity building programs. The She Business account is the banking solution for you women. Visit the nearest APSA branch or call 0302 429150 for more information. The number again, 0302 429150 for more information. Your story matters to APSA. Now let me come to the studio and properly introduce my guest. Everybody calls him Chief. He is a playwright, but what we don't know about him today, we are about to capture. So he is Chief Moomen. He's a poet, playwright, and creator of the Mansa World. Good to have you on TSB.
Good to have you.
How have you been?
Well, good to be here.
Yes, of course.
I'm overly excited to be on here, and thank you very much for the
I'm
invitation.
excited already.
Yes,
now, the song we sung.
Yes.
What does it mean?
Yeah, so it's actually a call and response, a traditional game inviting women and children, to come to the play. And it's also used for, that game where you pass the stones or the pebbles around Kuruma. So it's also quite similar to that. And it's actually been my signature for so many years now. I just use it to, set the tone for my performances and also to get the audience involved. So wherever I go around the world, if I'm doing a major poetry performance, I always start with Kuriye, and I'll teach them to respond Kurijain. So it's a way of bringing the communal spirit into the storytelling process.
How many countries have you traveled so far with Mansa?
So far,
Mansa World.
We've done about 4 for now. We did previews in Paris. That was the first place we went to. Right. And then we went to Cairo. We went to Geneva. We went to Bahamas. We went to Algiers. Actually, so 5.
5.
Yeah, so Algeria. So that's 5 countries. And this year we'll be doing more. of those stores.
So is it the same play you take everywhere, or you modify it every time?
So Mansa World is a platform for telling African stories, on the global market. I mean, if you know my history, we started
so Mansa World is not just about Mansa.
No. It's actually a world. So, we started with Heritage Theatre Series 10 years ago that focused on telling the Ghanaian story through theatre. And we did our GDA productions, which summarized the history of Ghana from ancient to modern times through a series of productions. And so from Heritage Theatre Series, we developed a concept of Mansa World, which now just not focuses on Ghanaian stories, but also African stories. And the first stories we're telling is about our ancient history. So Ghana, Mali, Songhai. These were some of the great empires of the ancient world from around the 12th century to around the 17th century. And we're telling the stories of these ancient African empires through mega theater productions. In 2022, we launched the first production, which is Mansa Musa and the Trail of Lost Gold. And we used it to build momentum for the project, to introduce the project to the world and, to our territory. And so now we formalized it into our first play, which is still Mansa Musa and the Trail of Lost Gold, the Prelude. And we're taking that on tour. But there are actually 4 more productions coming. We're telling the story of the founding of the ancient Ghana Empire, Dinga Sise, about Sundiata Keita, who actually founded the Mali Empire, about Askia Mohammed, one of the greatest generals of the Songhai Empire. So there are different stories, but woven together. And it's not also just about the past, it's also about the present, because we're telling the story of a group of young West Africans who are going back in time to rediscover their history, to learn the lessons, to be inspired by the glory, so that we can build Africa today and tomorrow.
Wow, so it becomes intergenerational.
Yes, it's an intergenerational storytelling. Yeah, so it's, and it's going to last for, we hope to be one of the biggest storytelling platforms out of Africa, telling the African story and inspiring the African, to really seize his or her destiny into their hands.
Is there a feminine story in your plays?
Yes, I mean, I'll even start by saying that the whole reason why I'm doing this is actually because of my mom. Growing up, my mom is a storyteller, and so during the way that she taught us was through stories a lot of times. So after prayers, especially our dawn prayer, she would sit us down, give us lessons, sing songs, tell us stories. So growing up, I always had her voice and her songs, echoing in my mind, and so it wasn't surprising that I also took to that, to that field. And I discovered also the art of poetry very early on when I saw a performance of Maya Angelou, the American poet who used to come to Ghana and came for one of the Panafest events in the 90s. And I was also
young
struck.
Then.
Yeah,
very young.
Yeah.
Because I remember you from Panafest.
So I heard her and I was so struck by her aura. And so first of all, my storytelling is influenced actually also by that maternal kind of like care I got and inspiration I got, right? And in our main productions too, because they are historical productions, we're also always deliberate to, showcase the female characters. So when we, did Wagbecheke, for example, the Yasanto story was very prominent. It was a very powerful moment in our story. But also the people that we used to tell the story. So in our cast and crew, we have about 150 member team, right?
Large.
We have almost, if not even more, an equal representation of women and men, sometimes even more women. And we always make sure that our narrators, are actually women. So in our current production, our main narrator, Bala Faseki, who historically is a male figure, is a griot. The griot were those who preserved the memories of the people and transmitted them through poetry and through song. So these were very revered figures in ancient West Africa, almost like you are a Chami figure, sort of, right? So the main storyteller in our production is actually a lady who is playing the role of a man. So very, very powerful. And when we even depict scenes like soldiers and all of that, we actually even use women. So even in the use of, women, we try to make them part of our important production. But some of the subsequent productions that we have focusing on very important female characters, we're looking at our independence struggle and some of the important roles that some of the female characters played. When we move into other territories, Eastern Africa, we'll tell the story of the Queen of Sheba and a few others. So in terms of historically, even though our history is largely, in terms of the spotlight, is largely dominated by male figures, in terms of the kings and the warriors, we are also attempting to see how we can put a spotlight on women who have played an important role, in that history.
Do you think we are telling the story of the Ghanaian woman enough?
Well, you are. And I have to congratulate you, because it's not enough to do what you do, it is important to be consistent.
Yes.
And the consistency is key in
and
building.
This July will be 17 years.
17 years. Yes. Wow. I look forward to the celebration.
This.
So congratulations for the work that you have been doing for inspiring many women and men, actually, because obviously when you're inspiring women, it's not women alone that you're inspiring. You're inspiring their children who are also, males and females. And so I think that there's always room for improvement. I think that now, if you look at, for example, the media landscape, there are a lot of women who are playing important roles, not just in front of camera, but also behind camera, in production roles, right? I mean, TV3, some of the biggest news media, GTV, TV3, Metro TV, when you go there, you find women, in very important positions. So I would even say that women now are in positions to tell their own story, and that's what you want, because you want to be able to be in the position where you can represent your perspective. So I think that there's more room for improvement. What I think that, for example, in the entertainment space, if you look at it, what I think that we should be more interested in is how women are portrayed. Because we have a particular stereotype that we have upheld, a stereotype of beauty, a stereotype of the responsibilities that women must play, in household, in politics and all of that. So it's our responsibility as storytellers to use our content to challenge those stereotypes, and to be able to, place empowering images. Unfortunately, now in our generation, it's still that women are overly sexualized, in the media, and that's one of the, and it's not just a challenge in Ghana, it's actually a challenge globally, right? So how do we still uphold and encourage empowerment of women without also not commodifying the woman, which is really the sorry state of affairs now. So I think that there's a lot of room for improvement, not just in representation, but in the kinds of representation that we see.
Right. My father was very traditional, and he also consistently told me that once you lose your ancestry, you lose your tradition, your culture, when you do not know your story, no matter how high you go, you will fail. You will lose it. And I keep referring to Obama. When he became the president, they had to trace his ancestry back to Kenya. We are losing this. Is it that the mothers are not telling the stories enough? Or sometimes the mothers themselves do not know the story?
Well, you have answered it. There are a number of ways. We're living in an age of information overflow, so we have access to more information now than ever before. And that information is packaged, whether it's news, whether it's music, whether it's movies, whether it's short clips. So if we are consuming that much information, the question is how much information of ourselves are we consuming? How much information of ourselves are we producing to preserve our own identities and cultures? So because now the world is a global village, our children will probably learn more about America and about US than they learn more about Ghana. That is because there's a lot of enticing, powerful, beautiful content out there that entices us. That's why when we sit here, we think that, the West is heaven. We have to struggle. Some would rather cross the dangerous Sahara over the Mediterranean to look for greener pastures. It's because we have been seduced by that story, because we see those places as the land of milk and honey and the ideal. That is why it is important for some of the things that we are doing with our work, because if we do not also make our culture, our stories, our history, appetizing and appealing, then people may always relegate it. They'll think that this is just relic of the past, this is prehistoric, this is, this is not modern, So that's important for us storytellers, because we're in an age of information and cultural warfare. That's why we are trying to build our stories, bring our history to life, let it know that, look, we have powerful kingdoms, ancient civilization, just to make people proud about that culture. And that has a way it connects to even the way we see ourselves. For example, we know that bleaching is a major problem African face, right? It's a billion-dollar industry because we have internalized the idea that the fairer you are, the more beautiful you are. That's a colonial, if you like, white supremacist idea of beauty. It's a Western standard of beauty. And if we continue to project that standard, if the people that we, cast for our movies are invariably of the lighter shade of our billboards, of our adverts, then it continues to entrench that idea. But if we begin to democratize our representation of the ideals of beauty, then we're setting new standards. Then the young girl growing up, I don't need to be as slim as a broomstick to be beautiful, right? I don't need to have certain kinds of hair to be beautiful. We can appreciate the variety and the diversity of beauty. So it's really important that we really assert our identity and our stories. And that's a matter of cultural and social reengineering, and it lies with we the creatives and we the storytellers, because storytelling does two things. It tells people who they are, but most importantly, it tells people who they can be. What are we telling our people about what we can be? If we continue to entrench narratives that will suppress and depress us, then we'll never rise. But if we entrench narratives that will liberate us, then that is a way to progress.
What do you think made us lose this love for our tradition and culture?
I think that is the way of the world, because, and I mean, from a philosophical point of view.
Can you go back to when it actually changed?
Well, I wouldn't be able to say that this is when it's a transition, right? Because you also have to understand that the world is not static. Let's let me use music, for example, right? We have our traditional music, right? That we play with our drums and our xylophones, right? And then the traditional music started interacting with influences from around the world when we brought in, the guitar to give us palm wine music. And that palm wine music evolved into high life music. High life music is a combination of our traditional rhythms and Western rhythms, right? We have adopted that now as a uniquely Ghanaian expression. But that uniquely Ghanaian expression is also an influence of factors, because it's not just purely African, it also has Western influence. So in the development of the world and cultures, it's inevitable that you absorb other cultures. I mean, you can never be an island. So if you take every single thing that you see today, right? For example, in my stories, we tell the story about the Mansas, the costumes that they were wearing silk. The silk came all the way from China, through the Silk Road, across the desert, all the way down there, So cultures in a way are intermixed. What is, however, important is to not lose yourself completely in that process of change. And it's a very nuanced. How do you retain your identity but still absorbing influences without being completely lost? And it's a very hard thing to do, but that's a matter of cultural creators, custodians of traditions and cultures. So what we consider our tradition today has undergone a lot of metamorphosis. Even some of the ancient gods, we have, are even new gods, if you go to the Yoruba tradition, when you look at some of the gods that they have today, they are not thousands of, some of them are even hundreds of years old, right? And it comes down to the issue of religion, because some people also argue that religion is one of the major factors that's affecting the development of Africa, that Christianity and Islam are borrowed religions. But then again, you think about it, some of these religions have been here for 1,000 years. Christianity has been here for 1,000 years, right? Our great-great-great-grandparents have been Muslims, or in some cases Christians. So when something has been with you for that long, it fails not to be indigenous, part of you. So it's also very nuanced. But then again, how do we take on those religions without necessarily losing ourselves? How do we understand that to be a Muslim doesn't mean that you have to be an Arab, or to be a Christian doesn't mean you have to be a European, even though Christianity didn't even evolve from Europe. So society and social reengineering takes deliberate thinking and philosophy, and probably this is where there has to be a synergy between our thinkers, our philosophers, our artists, and our policymakers to ensure that what kind of society are we really incubating, and what kind of identity. And that's one of the things that Nkrumah did very well, because he was interested in the concept of identity. If I continue on this, I'll talk and talk and talk.
Please talk. It's important. It's important. We need to learn. We need to know our history. We need to understand where we are coming from and where we are to be able to, move forward.
So I would just say, in summary, what I'm just trying to say is that we have to identify what kind of an African personality, or what is a Ghanaian personality, what is an African personality, what is our culture, what is our identity, and engineer it. Because these things, if you don't deliberately engineer it, they will happen organically. And currently it's happening organically, because our children are now consuming all sort of identities, and they are morphing their own identity. So who is at the back there thinking, let's take a controversial issue like, homosexuality, right? Somebody's view is that sexuality is fluid, and this is how a man should be able to marry a man, or a woman should be able to marry. That's the person's worldview. But that is not just the person's worldview. The person is deliberate about incubating that worldview through advocacy, through media representation, through engagement and all of that. And
even now, tattoos
and
everything.
Because that is their worldview, and they are pushing that worldview. So that's what the elite does. what is our worldview? And how are we pushing that worldview just beyond shouting, oh, it's against our culture, it's against our religion? Because everyone can always shout. But the difficult work that you have to do in the background to engineer society, sometimes I feel that we don't do very well with that. You know, so it's a matter of what do elites do. And I'll even conclude by saying that look at Elon Musk. Richest man in the world. He has a worldview of what America can be. And he's putting his money behind it, put his money behind Trump, put his money in trying to shape the society. And if you go around the world, that's actually what people with influence do. They put their money in shaping societies. But here, how do our wealthy people and our elite shape society? You know, beyond flaunting their riches and their cars and their big parties. That's all well and good, but how are we changing society? A lot of the funds that comes in for research, for cultural productions, come from abroad. So if people are funding even our cultural generation, then how are we being even authentic in our voice?
Even preserving our cultural and heritage side, money comes from abroad.
So you have to put your, that was the English term I forget, your hand where your mouth is or your mouth. So if we are not deliberate, if we don't have, you know, I call them makers of civilization, right? If we don't have people who understand the role of these things in our society and are really willing to put resources behind it, because right now, pretty much no one puts money behind it. So I tell young people when I interact today that, look, when we become wealthy and influential in society, as some would do, how do we use our wealth to influence and change society towards the view that we think society must advance towards?
That's a powerful one. We cry about, even these wealthy people cry about this honest stuff and this loyal stuff and all that. Where is it coming from? We were not raised like that. Let me take a break. When we come back, I want us to look at your concept of the Ghanaian woman and the mother when it comes to the Ghanaian woman. Taking into consideration your mother, your grandmother, and then the women, around you growing up. Well, you're watching TSP with me, Gifty Auntie, and today we are learning a lot, our history, who we are, where we are coming from, and definitely, I'm sure, by the time we finish, we'll have an idea where we want to go as Ghanaians, not just ordinary Ghanaians, but Ghanaians with the determination, the focus on making Ghana great and strong, like our forefathers told us to. Well, let me say thank you to House of Food, Auntie Vera and the team. We are grateful to you. We are so grateful to Juice Time 100% fruit juices. Thank you to Yap Cleaning Services. They make our environment clean all the time. Mrs. Oforipoko and the family, ever grateful to you. And of course, Zen Garden, they give us the natural plants, and all those who come on board to make sure that this production, this program goes on air week after week. And as I've told you, on the 11th of July, 2025, TSP with Gifty Auntie, that's the standpoint with Gifty Auntie, is going to be 17 good years. Watch out for programs that will line up, the conferences, and really, our theme for this year, as you know, is capturing the untold stories. So definitely we are going to capture the untold stories of women, our great-great-grandmothers, and women across the country who are doing things that are not in the public space, so we do not know about. We'll be back. Welcome back to TSP with me, Gifty Auntie, and my guest is Chief Moomen, who is a playwright, who is a poet, and a creative person, a historian, I must say, and somebody determined, to make sure we do not forget where we are coming from and where we want to go, chart the path to where we want to go. Again, I say thank you to Amazing Grace Enterprise for my fabric. My outfit is by Amateur. Thank you so much to her. Makeup by Theodora the Global, and makeup product Sigma Health and Beauty. They are at Makola. Thank you to 20 Crafts for my beads and jewelry, watch and rings. I love my jewelry. My dad used to say that. She said, "Washishan who says Sokoto Niba." Sokoto Niba. Well, we are so grateful to all of them. Now, Chief.
Yes, Sahini.
How was it like growing up? Where did you grow up?
Well,
Tamale?
No, I actually grew up in Accra.
Accra,
So
okay.
yes, I grew up in Kotubabi.
Oh,
Because
okay.
my dad migrated from the north. I come from the upper west, Towa, and settled here quite
You know,
early on.
I'm a Wala.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a Wala, adopted Wala princess.
Okay, nice. we're proud to have you. And so I grew up in Kotubabi. Our house was actually a gateway for many people in our community who were coming from our part of the country.
Okay.
And so they will stop, at our house before they find somewhere else. So I grew up in a very bubbly, a very communal environment with aunties and uncles and cousins, of course, and siblings. Right. So there was never a dull moment. And so there are a lot of women in my life. You know how traditionally when your mom gives birth to you, your auntie will have to carry you, they have to do. So I grew up in that very positive, reassuring, kind of environment. And I always consider myself lucky for the privilege of community. And I actually think what I do now is, in a sense, it connects back to how I grew, because my productions are a community. It's a community of people. Cool. It's a community of, of color, of riots, of talk, of sorrow, of joy, the whole mosaic of the human experience. And that's the kind of community I kind of grew up with. Yes.
And what was the childhood dream?
Oh, well, when I think back, so as I said, I grew up in that, my mom, my stepmom, aunties and uncles and all of that. And then there used to be a lot of meetings, prayers. And because you are Muslims, you always need to pray, a number of times a day. And usually after prayers, you sit back and have conversations. And one of the things that, my mom used to tell me is that sometimes when after prayers, I also go and stand as a young boy and try and preach. Well, actually, I used to preach, when I was because that's what I was seeing.
You an Ahmadi, right?
Yes, I'm an Ahmadi Muslim. So that's what I was picking up, growing. So I guess also the idea of oratory is something that I witnessed, because they were amazing preachers, when we were young in the mosques, my dad himself is an amazing preacher and all of that. And so something that I picked up, early on. But also something that, I probably observed was, as children, you're interested in superhero stories. You're Superman, Batman, and all of that when you think about it. But, when you think about it deeply, the real superheroes are the ones you live with, are your mom and your parents and how they multitask, And that actually, yes, later when I wanted to write a poem, for an occasion, to celebrate women, that's what I thought back at, the women I grew up seeing, my grandparents, the stories I grew up hearing. The sacrifices that they had to make and how they had to multitask and do and to be able to achieve a number of things. And that kind of like influenced the poem that you referenced that I wrote about, my grandma, which was a mosaic of women in my life, of my mom and my parents. And I have also a fantastic, siblings. My sister Shamima, has been a great source of support and inspiration to me. So I think that kind of upbringing made me respect womanhood at a very, very, very early age. So I would say that I was quite gender conscious at a very early age, and as I went through school and I had more education, my mind and my learning was reinforced by that gender consciousness. So I may not be your typical conservative, patriarchal man, although I'm still, a product of my African society. And so some of it I can't escape. But I think that I was very conscious at a very early age, growing up about the role of women in our lives and the need to respect, honor, and support and partner, women in terms of, domestic and professional output.
So, Chief, what's your concept or your idea of a Ghanaian woman?
That's a heavy question, right? Because sometimes as a man, you want to be careful in what you define as womanhood, because it's also not, you don't have that kind of experience, that kind of exposure, that kind of interaction with the world. Because no matter what you do as a man, you are still in many ways in this society privileged, because we are still largely in a patriarchal situation. So you have to be very careful in what you want to define as womanhood. Maybe your understanding of womanhood is what you grew up seeing, your parent, your mom, for example. That's your immediate example of womanhood. But
but I asked you this because of what you grew up to see, and then the kind of research you've done in your various productions. In learning about the various roles that women in the past, not just Yasantua. And I think in your submission you will talk about some of the women
Yes.
Especially from the north, the names that we don't really talk much about.
Yes.
You know, quite recently, I think, was it last year, I was in WA, and I did tell them the Federation of Women in Advocacy and Development, HECMAT, told them to institute an award in honor of the late Hawa Yakubu. And I'm so glad that they did. That this month, March, they did, you know, honor the first recipient is Professor Kaufman, which I think is very well deserving, you know, but we do not tell the stories from the northern part of the country.
I have a friend, Poetra Santua, who did this amazing project on Nadede, you know, the lady on the coin, who was a very influential figure in our independence struggle. But I think that if I would reflect on the role of women, especially Ghanaian women in our lives, I would say that our women are quiet revolutionaries. There's a lot, and if I use our independence, for example, Nkrumah could not have done all that he did without the massive support he had from the market women.
Exactly.
They were like his first base of support. Not only did they support him in kind, they supported him in cash. And when he had to break away from the CPP to form, from the UGCC to form his own party, the women were an important role they played. So obviously we know about Nkrumah and all of that, but that was an important base. And even till today, the market women play a very important role. The Makola market women, you know, the market, the resources that they control, the influence that they exert, you know, it's not something that we see in our faces, but they control things. And also that relates to even our traditional life and the way in our society was set up, right?
So, sorry to cut you. My father was a police officer, Gold Coast police officer. And he told us, smile, because, you know, every time I hear the story, I mean, I remember the story. It makes me so proud of myself as a woman. Told the story of, he was one of the police officers assigned to monitor Nkrumah at the polo grounds when he was going to declare independence. And there was a strategy to cause confusion. And then, you know, everything will scatter and then he will not be able to do it. And my father told me about how the market women, the big ones, strong ones, came and seized the pens, the papers, and the rifles, the guns of the police on the grounds. That they literally protected Nkrumah to be able to. But we are not telling these stories.
So we don't know. I mean, that's our responsibility. I mean, something like that I have to capture. And I'm glad that, you know, you've told me that story. I'll research more into it.
Look, my father had a book. I'll look for it. I think my big sister has it.
So I think it's about us being deliberate. So as I said, my first observation is that they are quite revolutionaries. And if you look at a lot of aspects of our lives, you know, it's not just domestic, our political life, national life, you see the women played very important, crucial roles. And I was making even the link to tradition, right? Where you have the queen mother and you have the king, and sometimes the chief or the king cannot make a decision until he consults the queen mother and all of that. There was that almost, you know, idea of the old woman and the role she plays in terms of as a repository of wisdom and wise counsel. But for me, what does all that mean in our modern age, right? Because we are evolving from a society where there were clear-cut rules and regulations, right? And that was a tradition, you know, the man goes out to look for the food, to hunt and all of that. The woman stays home, takes care of the children, does the domestic work. Men hardly do the domestic work, right? But now our society is transforming. So we need to ask ourselves, what should be the modern Ghanaian African household look like? Because the women are doing the same thing as the men are doing, right? The women are also working, right? So if you're in a household where your wife is doing an 8 to 5 job like you, and you all come back home, do you expect to just sit back and let her do everything, come and cook for you, come and take care of the child, clean for you and all of that? And if that is not done, does that mean that as a woman, she is relinquishing her role and it means that we are destroying the domestic, foundation? So I think that that's one of the things that we need to take critically off. My thinking is that we need to meet each other halfway, especially in our conservative environment, you know, like this. We may not be able to completely, you know, overturn the wheels like you may have in some Western countries, right? Where sometimes it even goes the completely opposite direction. But we shouldn't expect women to do exactly what they were doing in the past. because our world has changed, and it wouldn't make sense now, right? So how are young couples navigating, parenthood now, and responsibility now, and expectation now? Because as a man, you shouldn't expect that if your wife is not washing your things, she's not being wifely, because now they have washing machines, right? There's technology that you can throw your things in. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we still hold on to those probably important, because there's a reason why there's some division of labor, right? Because women are naturally gifted at things that men can't, right? So how do we still hold on to the values of the past while still being realistic to the needs of the time? That's also another thing that we have to think about, so that we kind of like avoid conflict. I know that now the world is being pushed towards conservative values because they feel that people are being too liberal. That's what happens, right? Yeah. When the world becomes so conservative, there's a liberal pushback. And when it becomes too liberal, there's also a conservative pushback. So it's always about balance. So what does balance mean for us in Africa? Because what it means may not necessarily be the same as what it means in Europe. That's why when people actually move to Europe, they don't have a choice than to find that balance. Yeah. So a man living in Europe with a wife will do certain things that when he comes back to Africa, he can never do, because he is transplanted into a different reality. So these are very interesting things that as a society, a lot of things that we need to be thinking about to be able to fashion out what is the ideal for our current circumstance.
What about motherhood? How we are mothering now?
It's challenging. I have a daughter, so I have a wife and a daughter. It's a 1-year-old daughter.
Daddy's girl.
and my daughter is actually named after my mom. In honor of the role that she plays. I look at my mom today. There's no way our wives or our daughters can equal this. I would like to say the strength. My mom has she gave birth to about 11 children. Till now, she's still on her feet. She can never be idle. She has to find work to do. She's always around the house, cleaning and cooking, anxious,
and
calling.
You wonder what she's on, right?
Yeah, you wonder what so there's just this superpower that our mothers have. And even my sister usually talks about it. That generation, we can't replicate it, right? Because they needed to be that to survive in that world that they found themselves in, right?
Yeah. Because when she was on, Shamima was on the program, she talked about how her mother could cook a storm for. Feed everybody who comes. Was feeding everybody. Always cooking. And
as our house, as I said, it was a meeting point for everyone.
Yeah.
So the cooking pot never ran cold. You're always cooking. Them visitors who come, you have to cook again. And I look at all that burden, all that hard work that woman has done, all of that generations ago, and still on her feet. We can never be too appreciative of our mothers. We just can't. We can't thank them enough. It's something that we don't even have the human capacity to do. The sacrifices that they have gone through to put us where we are today. And for us, it is just a matter of making them proud with the little that we do to show that at least that sacrifice, that investment has not gone in vain, right? So what does motherhood like today? I think that is also another question that Africans are grappling. I don't have the bandwidth, because I'm still now a new father. And we're trying to navigate our way. We're trying to see what kind of daughter do we want to grow. But thankfully to have a very, very, very good wife, who is reasonable, grounded, down to earth. And, she runs the show mainly, which is usually the case.
Because you're mostly not around anyway.
Well, I am around. She runs the show.
You are running around being Mansa Musa.
I know, right?
And Kunta Kinte.
But I'm trying to be a bit more deliberate, because it's important. As I said, I've not found the answer, because now I'm even going to be more absent. So when we were married, I told her, look, now I'm a house husband, because usually she'll go to work and come and meet me, because my work is behind a PC. I'm writing, I'm conceptualizing. Right. But now I'm getting to the phase where I have to be on the move, and that's now that we also have a daughter. So how do you balance the equation? So when you are present, you try to be present, but it's a learning experience for me. But I think that motherhood today would require, it has to be a collaborative effort between the mom and the dad. There is something that we are lucky to have that I fear we may not have in the future, because a lot of us now of this generation, we still have our parents.
Exactly.
So when we wake up, we take my daughter to my mom, and then my wife goes to work. I do what I have to do, right? So that blessing of still having this generation of mothers to still continue that tradition, of and through that too, my daughter is being trained by my mom, right? would that continue to persist?
Should definitely not miss the stories that
that had the benefit of. So I feel that we're actually in a very important period of transition. Yeah. When this generation of our mothers, transition out, which is inevitable, but God bless their effort, and new generations of mothers emerge. What is what structures would they have? What communal structures do we have? Because I think we take that thing for granted. The blessings of still having our mothers to take care of our children for us at this point in our life. And I have so many friends. So many, or the mother comes to stay with them, right? Now that our wives are now professional women themselves, and pursuing their own tradition, pursuing their own dreams and aspirations, they may not be able to have that much time or focus that our mothers have, because their entire life was dedicated to family, right? But now there are other competing interests. So it is interesting that the African society is transitioning, and what we have to do is to observe other societies, because if we're not careful, we end up exactly as how other societies have ended up. And so we ask ourselves, is that because that's the globalization, that's the trend. Is that how we want to end up? If it's not how we want to end up, then what can we begin to do? How can we begin to ask ourselves the hard questions and think through? But in this country, you're all thinking about food and drink and power and things. So it's like we're still chasing bread and butter issues, school fees. But the philosophical issues in life that eventually influence the way we evolve. It's like, Charlie, if you bring this to Amasa, how hard drink, when we get to the bridge, we'll cross there. So I find it interesting. I don't know if I'm answering the question. I'm just reflecting.
You just drawn my attention to something, and it's so important. You use the right word. We are transitioning. Somebody like me, my parents went 20-something years ago, so I have no one to look up to. I have no one to take my child to. Your generation, most of you have your parents around. You are growing. A time will come. Your parents will transition. What are you picking from them? What conversations are you having with them? And how are you going to pass it on to your children? Or you're going to tell them, the children of the telenovelas that we've been watching. It's a very, very powerful point you've raised that we need to think about.
How to be deliberate in parenthood now, and what it will mean for a world that is increasingly interconnected, increasingly with such an overflow of information. And I think that even as I talk, it's something that is now also dawning on me as a parent to think through what kind of world my daughter is going to grow up in, and what kind of parenthood that we are going to provide for that daughter, with the foundation of the mother, but what role does a father have to play in complementing that role? These are very important questions, and I hope that we can evolve a society that at least upholds some of the values of our traditions while still finding what is workable and realistic for us.
Tough one, isn't it?
Tough one. But but
we have to be intentional.
We have to be intentional. That's the word. We have to be intentional.
Chief, next week is Mother's Day.
Yes.
Do you have any program? Coming anything you're doing?
No, not really, actually. But usually, sometimes I get invitations to perform, and at events. Even though these days I hardly perform again because of the work I'm doing with writing. And I'm growing old. I've been doing this for 20 years.
Please.
You are
growing old. For the way.
So I think that I've gotten to the point where I can say, let's leave the performances for the young ones. But of course, I'll take this opportunity to definitely wish my mom and my happy Mother's Day, and my sisters, my aunties. I have incredible aunties, and obviously my wife for that important foundation that I've had, and that cocoon. And that's also one thing I don't take for granted. When you are this old and you still have your parents around, they are like a shield for you. So you dread the day that the inevitable happens. So I'm still very privileged that at this point you still have that cocoon around you, and in a way you're still very much sheltered. And my dad tells us that when you're growing up and you have your parents, you're still sheltered, and life actually begins when you now have to look at the world without that protective shelter. And so I wish them all, and obviously to all women, and to you, Ohenire, for the phenomenal role that you have played in this quality and consistency. And I hope that through these conversations and through our engagement, we would think about the rather very important software issues of life, and that we'll be able to fashion out an identity, a culture that is still rooted in who we are, but also realistic to the times that we are in. These are important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Now, finally.
Yes.
What poem are you leaving us with?
Yeah. Let me see if I can just do an excerpt from the poem that I wrote.
Yes.
And it's a longer poem, but I'll just do an excerpt of it. And forgive me, I may be talking through because as I've already confessed, yes. I've grown so old that. So anyway, when I was a child, my favorite person in the world was Na, my grandmother. During most school breaks, I was sent to the village to spend my vacations with her, and these were holidays I fervently looked forward to. I'll spend the first couple of days running riot, climbing giant trees, plucking unripe mangoes, chasing bushmeat, or diving in muddy ponds. But that was just the initial hysteria, after which I pretty much spent most of my time with Na, and that is how I discovered what a phenomenal woman she was. Grandma was our sunrise and our sunset. During every morning, she would rouse the whole household awake after the morning prayers and chores. She went to work. She ran an enterprising food business, in the village, hot porridge in the morning, TZ, toza, ayo, dawa soup later in the evening. And even deep into the evening, she would set up her tea stand for drivers who were driving through the village to sit and drink some tea. Some would actually borrow and insult and share some laughter and all of that. But the amazing thing about my grandmother is how, in addition to this, she still managed to do so much more. Grandma meant different things to different people. Young women getting married always had to come see her for some advice. Married women having problems always came to her. She'd be stacking wood in her fire while giving some pieces of advice. My grandmother had helped to deliver a whole generation of children in the village, and so she had a special insult for every child. Hey, you okro mouth. Hey, you elephant nose, and all sort of that. And how many times did an anxious mother not run into our compound with a feverish child looking for some kind of medicine? My grandmother always had a pot of boiling herbs in the compound, which she prescribed to adults and children, alike. Whenever there was a huge festival and outdooring, she would always be at the heart of affairs, organizing things. When government officials wanted them to organize the community for engagement, she would be at the heart of organization, NGOs, and all sort of that. But of all the things that my grandmother did, I thought the one thing that she was more than anything else is that she was a teacher. She was always passing down knowledge. She was always teaching something to someone. She always had, her people, her other women around her, empowering and teaching them. And my grandmother was a phenomenal woman of her time. But I also see the traits and the values in my grandmother in many people have grown up seeing: my aunties, my mom, my sisters. And to you also, Ohinire, I see that resilience, that power, that dynamism in her, in you, and in many African women. And so we celebrate African women. We celebrate mothers on this special occasion of Mother's Day. I still got a smile. You got it. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm so honored that you really thought about me and invited me. I couldn't have started the month of May without you. Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much. Well, before I wrap up here and come back with a bit of me, I have a message from APSA. APSA says it understands the unique journey of women in business, from juggling multiple responsibilities to navigating financial complexities and societal expectations. Your resilience and vision inspire APSA. That's why APSA has created the She Business account, tailored to empower visionary women leaders like you and me, with collateral-free loans up to 2 million Ghana cedis, insurance coverage, discounted loan interest rates, and capacity building programs. The She Business account is the banking solution for you women. Visit the nearest APSA branch or call 0302 429150 for more information. The number again, 0302 429150 for more information. Your story matters to APSA. Now again, let me say thank you to House of Food, Juice Time, Yap Cleaning Services, E-Gardens, Sigma Health and Beauty, and of course, Vena Mineral Water and a Bigo Drink. So we take a break. When we come back, I'll give you a bit of me.